After 15 months of war, Gaza has been devastated. 2/3 of the buildings in the Strip have been destroyed or damaged. Tens of millions of tons of rubble cover Gaza. And it's going to cost hundreds of millions of dollars just to clear the debris.
You got enough on your plate just picking up garbage.
And that's before we even consider the dangerous work of removing what may be hundreds of unexploded ordnance and failed rockets.
Let's get going. I'm ready to help.
Not so fast. Some experts are saying clearing the rubble and rebuilding homes could take until 2040 or even longer. And basic services like water, electricity, schools, and hospitals,
those things take years to build.
In the meantime, about 2 million people are living in Gaza, mostly in tents or other temporary shelters, living in a hazardous environment filled with buildings on the verge of collapse.
This is bad, my friend.
So how's Gaza gonna get rebuilt?
Well, like my wife says, that's a good question.
First up,
Show me the money.
according to the UN, it's gonna take over $50 billion to rebuild.
That's a lot of shkarol.
But shkarol doesn't grow on trees, so where's Gaza gonna get tens of billions of dollars?
Yeah, where?
I'm glad you asked. Well, there are a few different options. One, the Gulf states. They are loaded with cash and already said they'd help. 2, the EU has already announced it would throw in some cash to the tune of $120 million. Wow, a generous 0.25% of what's needed. And 3, the US has also committed to the cause. But let's be honest, why would these countries spend tens of billions of dollars on rebuilding Gaza? I'm not discounting their sense of moral obligation to the Palestinian people, especially after spending decades perpetuating their refugee status and supporting groups like Hamas who have accomplished nothing but get Palestinians killed and their homes flattened. But putting all of that aside, at least some of these countries are asking,
what do I get?
What do you get? Profits, baby. Allow me to explain. There's huge financial opportunity in Gaza's reconstruction. Each of these countries have businesses that could handle construction, managing essential infrastructure, or will benefit from future trade agreements. Businesses that pay taxes, or better yet, have financial ties to government officials.
The money I put in his pocket for construction alone, he should hit his knees.
It's a tricky balance, but sometimes you gotta spend money to make money, right? But there's a catch.
Always.
Since Israel withdrew from Gaza in 2005, Gaza has seen 5 wars between Israel and Hamas, leading to widespread destruction again and again and again and again. So no one's gonna spend $50 billion just to see it flush down the drain the next time Hamas wants some publicity.
It's what they call negative attention getting.
Which means Gaza needs to be stabilized and demilitarized. Which means someone needs to be in charge in Gaza, and it can't be the guys who keep starting wars with Israel. So who's gonna secure and govern Gaza? Well, right now Hamas is still trying to stay in control, and no matter what, the chances Israel gets rid of every Hamas fighter are,
Nothing. Zero.
So no matter who's in charge, a Hamas presence is a challenge they'll have to deal with. To establish control, Hamas will need to be demilitarized, and a new security force will need to be established to police the Strip. So, what are the options? Well, the first option is Hamas's slightly more legitimate rival, the Palestinian Authority. They're already in charge of the day-to-day management of a bunch of Palestinian towns and cities in the West Bank, and could serve a similar role in Gaza. The PA has said that if it's given control of Gaza, it will ensure that there's one government and that Hamas won't govern and won't be militarized. And the PA already has a police force that has experience with Hamas and other similar groups.
Well, that's all the good news now. Why don't you tell us the bad news?
Well, the PA police's track record isn't exactly confidence building. In 2007, Hamas easily gave the PA the boot from Gaza. And in PA-controlled areas over the last few years, Hamas has grown largely unchecked. Just recently, when the PA tried to put an end to that, it went so poorly that the IDF had to finish the job.
Anything else?
Actually, a few things. For one, like Hamas, the Palestinian Authority has historically supported attacks on Israeli civilians. Until recently, the PA even paid special stipends to the families of those who carried out such attacks.
No good.
PA schools have been caught time and time again glorifying violence against civilians and erasing Israel from textbook maps.
No good.
And perhaps most importantly, the PA is well known for its deep corruption. Not exactly the guys you want in charge of billions of dollars of construction.
Trust me, my boy.
Yeah, I don't think so. Option 2, the Trump plan. Trump proposed the U.S. take over Gaza, kick out everyone living there, and build the Riviera of the Mediterranean.
Seriously?
Hard to say.
Well, that's not gonna happen.
Yeah, well, it seems more likely his words are aimed at Arab governments who have refused to propose any vision for the future of Gaza. He's basically just saying to them, step up or else. And it seems to be working. Egypt has since started to float some ideas, and an Arab summit is on the books to hopefully form a plan.
Thank you for that united front.
So what'll their plan look like? That would be option 3, an international coalition. Remember Germany after World War II?
Look, I don't remember nothing.
Yeah, well, huge swaths of Germany lay in rubble, and their government was dissolved. Sound familiar? So soldiers and bureaucrats from other countries came in to keep the peace and help the country get back on track. A force like this could be established in Gaza by the UAE, Saudi Arabia, other Gulf states, or a mixture of countries from around the world. Egypt will probably take a central role in preventing weapons smuggling, since it's the only country besides Israel to share a border with Gaza. And the EU has already sent a civilian mission to help monitor the border crossings. The Saudis, who've been growing their portfolio of massive construction projects, may push for a central role in the practical rebuilding of Gaza. And even if Gaza doesn't become the 51st state, American companies may play a central role in Gaza's future. An American-Egyptian company has already been handling security checkpoints inside Gaza. But, again, there are a few problems.
What kind of things?
Well, for one, the people living in Gaza aren't Emirati or Saudi or European or American. They're Palestinian.
Duh.
And after decades of Palestinians being persecuted and even expelled by Arab countries, Gazans may not be keen to invite them in to run the joint. So an international force would be a delicate proposition and will likely require Palestinian leaders overseeing the international force. But finding leaders who aren't Hamas or corrupt PA officials is going to take time.
In the meantime.
In the meantime, many world leaders have pushed for a combination of options 1 and 3, combining the PA with an international administration, at least in the short term.
Stop crying, I'm embarrassed enough.
Right, okay, so let's pretend we're all optimists and assume all that gets figured out. Gaza gets stabilized, demilitarized, and the money starts to rain down like rain. We'll just go with rain. So then what? What could reconstruction look like?
All good questions.
There are 2 main historical examples that could show us what the reconstruction of Gaza could look like: Hiroshima and Leningrad. During World War II, both Hiroshima and Leningrad were reduced to rubble and suffered unprecedented casualties. But the differences in how reconstruction played out in these cities can help shed light on where Gaza might be headed. Leningrad's reconstruction was severely hampered by corruption, mismanagement, and economic issues. For decades, many people lived in squalor in temporary hostels constructed in the ruins of hospitals and factories. But in Hiroshima, despite the decimation caused by the atomic bomb, reconstruction was smoother. Essential services like electricity and water were restored within days or weeks, and reconstruction was fully completed within 15 years. So if we're assuming Gaza is going to have a functional government, remember, we're pretending to be optimists, the reconstruction process will hopefully look more like Hiroshima than Leningrad. Which means first things first, rubble needs to be cleared.
Hey, garbage is our bread and butter.
Now, a lot of the rubble can be recycled for things like repaving roads and sidewalks and building new infrastructure. But Gazans need to be prepared to spend the next few years living in tents and caravans in large, temporary camps scattered throughout the Strip. But it's critical that these temporary camps are just that, temporary. Urban planners are going to need to get involved to ensure that functioning cities are built instead of just new refugee camps. To alleviate the overcrowding that Gaza is so well known for, the Strip could be artificially expanded, and they could create man-made islands off the coast, possibly even with some of the rubble from the war. These islands could also host an airport and a seaport, which could be easier to monitor than facilities within Gaza proper.
Just gotta keep an eye on it, that's all.
The new Gaza will also need to rethink how it gets water and electricity. Before the war, Gaza largely depended on Israeli supplies of electricity and diesel fuel for local generators. The Strip doesn't have any freshwater sources, besides a heavily polluted aquifer, so it mostly relies on desalination plants. And those plants, in turn, rely on electricity from Israel. but a lot of people think that over-dependence on Israel was unhealthy for the relationship.
I'm looking forward to total independence, believe me.
So Gaza's grid could be connected to Egypt, Jordan, or even Saudi Arabia. And the PA is already planning on building a few power plants in the West Bank, which could link up to Gaza. But it gets even better. Off of Gaza's coast, there are natural gas deposits already designated for the PA. It's considered a small gas field, but it's enough to power Gaza for like 50 to 100 years. So overall, Gaza has potential. A prime location right at the nexus of Asia and Africa. A beautiful coastline and rich history could translate into beach resorts and tourism. But there's one critical, foundational issue that needs to be addressed before really any of this is possible. And to some extent, it's even more complex than roads, electricity, water, homes, and all that good stuff. When Hiroshima rebuilt itself, it didn't just build homes and businesses. It built a new identity.
It's all in your mind.
After the horrors of the atomic bomb, you'd imagine they could have held a grudge. But instead of seeking revenge, Hiroshima decided it would move forward and build for peace. Just 2 years after the bomb was dropped, Hiroshima held its first annual Peace Festival, where the residents of the city declared that only those who experienced the worst of war can ardently pursue peace. 2 years later, the city of Hiroshima was designated as a peace memorial.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, it's beautiful.
It's really inspiring.
Yeah, it is. And as Gazans rebuild, they're gonna need to take a page out of Hiroshima's playbook. Part of that could be symbolic, putting peace at the forefront of the name of a reconstruction project or monument. But it's also going to need action on the ground. Social, cultural, and educational initiatives will need to be formed to advance the cause of peace. No more learning math and physics through lessons glorifying violence. But it's not going to be easy. The last thing Gaza's current leaders want right now is peace. But in Hiroshima, the initiative for peace didn't come from top down. Came from bottom up. It was average citizens who came together and said, it's time for peace. Okay, so at the end of the day, where is Gaza headed? It could follow the same cycle it has for the past 2 decades. Attack Israel, suffer the horrors of war, rinse, repeat. But if Gaza manages to take another path, it could become the most important symbol of peace since Germany became allies with the Jewish state. I'm guessing no one saw that coming in 1938. So hopefully even with our dreams and optimism, we'll be surprised where Gaza is in just a few years. Surprised in a good way.
Shkaro.